Hi, I'm Shelley Young, owner of the Chopping Block, and today I'm going to teach you how to make bread and butter pickles. But first I want to talk a little bit about cucumbers. We see a lot of different varieties of cucumbers these days, and we want to get the right one for our pickles. Let's look at this. This is an English cucumber. We see this a lot in the grocery stores nowadays. This has got small, it says seedless. It's not actually seedless, but they're very small seeds. And it's got a very thin skin, which is why they usually put this plastic on it. So it's really better for fresh eating or quick pickling. And this is our just regular cucumber we get in conventional garden. We usually peel that cucumber. It's a little bit bitter and tough, and seed that as well. But those are not the ones we're going to use to can with. This is a pickling cucumber. This is a denser cucumber, meatier and firmer, and we use that so that it gets a little crispier when we can it. Our bread and butter pickles have a little bit of a knobby texture to them. They're very firm, and you want a real fresh pickling cucumber for making pickles. If they're even a little bit spongy, you're not going to get a crisp pickle. What I'm going to do is cut the ends off here, and I like a nice thick slice. Generally bread and butter pickles are sliced. So I'm just going to go through, discard that. Make sure these are nice and clean too, that's really important. And I'm going to do a real thick pickle like that. So I've sliced my cucumbers. The next step here is I'm going to put 2 cups of ice on there and 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. What we're going to do here is just toss the salt in here, and what we're doing is extracting some of the liquid out of the cucumbers so that we can replace it with the pickling brine. The ice helps to keep the cucumbers a little bit crisp and cool so they don't just get really wilted. And then we're going to drain all that liquid off in a couple of hours. So we're going to let these set for a couple hours. So you can see our cucumbers have been sitting for a couple hours now. There's a lot of liquid in the bottom here. There's still a little bit of ice, so I'm going to discard that, whatever ice is left, but they're nice and cold and still really crisp, but we've also extracted a lot of moisture. I'm going to drain these. Do not rinse them, just drain them. Next I'm going to make the pickling brine for our bread and butter pickles. In a saucepan I've got 2.5 cups of granulated sugar. I've got 2.5 cups of cider vinegar here. A teaspoon of celery seed, tablespoon of mustard seed, 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. The main reason that we're going to heat this up is to dissolve the sugar, bring out a little bit of the flavor of the spices, but it also helps in the canning process. We're going to take this hot liquid after we cook it. We're going to pour that over the cool cucumbers, and then we're going to process the cucumbers in a hot water bath. So if I've got this liquid already hot, the temperature inside the jar will reach a hotter temperature more quickly, so I don't have to cook the cucumbers quite as much. I'm going to stuff the jars next, but in preparation for that, I've prepared my canning jars. I'm using quart jars today, and these are wide mouth. I think those are a lot easier to work with, but you can do pints or whatever size you want. It doesn't affect the cooking time as much. Just depends how many pickles you like to have out at one time. But these jars were washed with soapy water, rinsed thoroughly, and then sanitized. And I sanitize my jars by putting them in a 200-degree oven for about a half an hour, or at least a half an hour. But I just leave them in there until I'm ready to use them, so they stay sanitized. So these have just come out of the oven, so they're a little bit warm, but they're not too hot to handle too much because they're only 200 degrees. I do find the jars, I never quite get that right. A recipe will say this many jars and this much liquid, and if I run into some hiccups in pickling, it's that I've got not enough jars or not enough liquid or something like that can happen. So I always have maybe one more than I think I need. And the nice thing about the brine is if you don't have enough to fill the jars, you can always make a little bit more. But what I'm going to do here is start putting some of the ingredients in. Now I have these are grape leaves. This is not in the recipe, but if you happen to have access to them, People say that they help to make the pickles more crispy. I don't know if that's true, quite frankly, but I have them, and it looks cool. I'm going to put my bay leaf right in here because I have these whole nice fresh ones. The recipe calls for about, I think, 1/8 teaspoon of chili flakes divided between the jars, and about 1/2 teaspoon of black peppercorns. You can put more or less to your taste. I like a little more, so I'm going to add a little bit more. A little bit of red pepper, and some fresh onions. I'm going to start putting my pickles in, kind of alternating the onion and the pickles. And you push those down in there so it's nice and tight. And you come just up to under the rim of the canning ring. I've got my hot brine. I'm going to start filling the jars with that brine. I also have on the stove a large stock pot, which I started a while ago to bring to a boil. So make sure you've got that going now also. You fill this up just to below the rim here, or the ring. Give yourself some head space for pressure inside of the jar. So I want to just do a wipe down on the rim so you get a nice seal with a clean, damp cloth. Put our lids and our rings on there. So I'm not using any special canning equipment today. Canning pots are fantastic and they're inexpensive. This is quite a industrial pot for most people to have. So if you do have some interest in canning, I'd invest in a canning pot. But if you just have a regular stock pot, do smaller jars so they can just fit in your regular stock pot. But we'll just place these down in here. Watch your fingers. The water needs to cover the jars. Now I know the water level is going to raise as I drop these in, so should be right over the surface. If there is one canning piece of equipment to invest in, I would invest in the jar lifters. I'm going to use tongs today, but those are really handy. This is going to process for about 10 to 15 minutes. So I put the jars of pickles in the boiling water, and when I did that, the temperature reduced. So I wanted to bring that back to a boil, and that's the point when I start the timing. So we boiled them for 10 minutes. I turned off the heat, and I took about half of the water out of the pot because I didn't have my jar lifters, so they can get a hold of the jars and pull them out with a towel. Just took a towel, grabbed them, pulled them out. And if you have a jar lifter, you don't have to take any of the water out. You can just use that. Now these are finished except for one thing. They're going to sit, and in a few minutes you're going to hear a popping sound, and that's where you get a complete seal. I want you to hear what it sounds like when there's not a seal yet. If you process one of the jars and you don't get a seal, put that in the fridge because you don't have a seal. So it's not shelf stable. And if you do, put it on the shelf and have it in a month or so. They should be perfect about then. They should last a good 6 months to a year. And that is how you make bread and butter pickles.